After the fall of Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad's regime, Russia could lose its military bases located in Syria. If this happens, it could have serious consequences for the Kremlin, reports the American Institute for the Study of War ISW. Russia has used its naval base in Tartus to project power in the Mediterranean Sea. Through this base, Moscow has threatened NATO's southern flank and connected its Black Sea assets with the Mediterranean. Analysts believe that the loss of Russian bases in Syria would likely disrupt Russian logistics efforts to replenish supplies and the rotation of the African Corps. Russian operations and power projection in Libya and sub-Saharan African countries would be particularly weakened. In turn, Russia could attempt to use its presence in Libya and Sudan as alternatives. However, the lack of official agreements with these countries and insufficient infrastructure make them inadequate substitutes. The ISW also added that the fall of Assad's regime and Russia's failure to maintain it would damage Russia's global image as a reliable ally. This in turn threatens its influence over African autocrats that Russia seeks to support and undermines its broader geopolitical goal of positioning itself as a global superpower. It is noted that in the same report, analysts concluded that the rapid collapse of Assad's regime was a strategic and political defeat for Moscow. Analysts remind that Russia intervened in the Syrian conflict in 2015 to protect Assad's regime after mass protests erupted in 2011 as part of the larger Arab Spring movement. This in turn triggered a civil war in Syria and threatened to overthrow Assad. At the same time, Russian President Vladimir Putin has long viewed the color revolutions that led to the emergence of new democratic governments in former Soviet republics as a threat to the stability and security of his regime. Putin also broadly opposes democratic movements aimed at removing authoritarian leaders linked to the Kremlin around the world. He believes these movements undermine his efforts to create his envisioned multipolar world, where Russia and its key authoritative allies and partners play a crucial role. Regarding Syria, analysts note that Russia's inability or decision not to reinforce Assad's regime amidst the rapid advance of the Syrian opposition across the country will also undermine Russia's credibility as a reliable and effective security partner globally. As a result, this will negatively impact Putin's ability to garner global support for the multipolar world he desires. The rapid collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, a regime that the Kremlin helped prop up since 2015, is a strategic political defeat for Moscow and has thrown the Kremlin into a crisis as it seeks to retain its strategic military basing in Syria, the report states.
An Associated Press journalist in Damascus reported airstrikes in the area of the Meza military airport, southwest of the capital Sunday. The airport has previously been targeted in Israeli airstrikes, but it was not immediately clear who launched Sunday's strike. The Israeli military refused to comment on the airport strike. Israel often does not publicly claim responsibility for attacks in Syria. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israeli forces have seized a buffer zone in the Golan Heights established by a 1974 ceasefire agreement with Syria. He spoke on Sunday after a lightning rebel advance ended Syrian President Bashar Assad's rule. Netanyahu said the decades-old agreement had collapsed and that Syrian troops had abandoned their positions, necessitating the Israeli takeover. Israel captured the Golan Heights in the 1967 Mideast War and annexed it. The international community, except for the United States, views it as occupied Syrian territory.
According to Russian military propagandist Alexander Arutyunov, who hosts the Z channel Razvedos, at least one group of Russian servicemen in Syria has found themselves surrounded and cut off from their main bases in the region. The situation, he says, looks extremely critical since there is no military way out of it. They have no chance of breaking through on their own. There is nowhere to expect reinforcements, writes Arutyunov, describing the situation of the cut-off servicemen. This group is presumably deprived of both air support and the ability to join up with other units. The encirclement of Russian troops has become a symbol of the deep crisis in Russia's Syrian campaign, which is facing serious problems amid the collapse of Bashar al-Assad's regime. The only chance to save the servicemen remains a political situation. Arutyunov expressed hope that our compatriots will not be forgotten, emphasizing the seriousness of the threat the group faced. They won't forget in the literal sense, he added, hinting at possible tragic consequences if Moscow fails to reach an agreement with the new forces controlling the region. The Z propagandist does not write directly but hints that the surrounded Russians will be able to survive only if Erdogan helps Moscow or if negotiations with the rebels take place. However, until recently, the Kremlin regime has been launching missile and bomb strikes against them and calling them terrorists. The chances of successful negotiations are minimal. Russians publish videos of the rebels and write that they are preparing to attack Latakia, where the Russian Khmeimim airbase is located. CNN Turk reports that Russia has asked Turkey to help withdraw its troops from Syria, where rebels have toppled the regime of Moscow ally dictator Bashar al-Assad. The Kremlin is trying to withdraw all personnel from the battlefield except for 2 military bases. According to the channel, Russia has already submitted a request to Ankara to help organize the safe exit of its military. Obviously, the Russians will withdraw their manpower from the battlefield, with the exception of the Tartus naval base and the Khmeimim air base. The TV channel reports. It appears that Russian military personnel will be sent to a region controlled by Turkish forces and then flown to Russia by air. The influence of Iran's puppet forces in Syria has also long since diminished, CNN Turk notes.
A battle took place between Ukrainian Sea-Baby drones and aircraft, helicopters, and Raptor missile boats of the occupying Russian army in the Black Sea, near Kerch Bay. This is stated in the information of the Security Service of Ukraine. Marine drones of Ukraine, Sea-Baby, with machine guns mounted on them fired on Russian helicopters and airplanes in Kerch Bay on the night of December 5th to 6th. That night, a group of Ukrainian drones engaged in a battle with Russian helicopters, planes and patrol boats, Raptor, which were trying to intercept them. The Russians sent helicopters to fight off the sea drones in the usual way, but they unexpectedly opened fire on them. As a result of the battle, the enemy suffered losses in killed and wounded. The helicopters received significant damage and require major repairs. These data became known by radio interception. As indicated, the Russian pilots considered themselves hunters and counted on an easy hunt, but they became the prey, because the sea drones opened fire in response. It is noted that the newest Sea-Baby were equipped with large-caliber machine guns with ballistic programs for automatic guidance and auto-capture of targets. The intercepted Russian radio exchange indicates that there are dead and wounded on board the helicopters. The helicopters themselves received significant damage and now require major repairs, Ukraine said. Also, Ukrainian drones reportedly hit a barge carrying military equipment and equipment for the repair of the Crimean Bridge, which the invaders are still unsuccessfully trying to put in order after the past explosions of the Ukrainian Special Service.